of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
Well. After the barnstorming powerhouse of firecrackers of season opener The Smugglers, it's time for something a bit more low-key and inconsequential. So put on your gloves and a sensible woolly hat and join us at the South Pole as we greet the dubiously rendered return of the 10th planet. I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark, and before we meet our very special guest, let's get up to speed with where we are in the story. The TARDIS brings the Doctor and his friends to a space tracking station in the Antarctic. And straight into trouble. A space mission is going badly wrong, and a new planet has appeared in the sky. Mondas, ancient fabled twin planet of Earth, has returned. Soon its inhabitants arrive. But while they used to be just like the humans on Earth, now they are very different, devoid of emotions. Their bodies replaced with plastic and steel. The Cybermen are here. Humanity needs all the help it can get, but the one man who seems to know what's going on is terminally ill. As the Cybermen take over, the Doctor is dying.
You must come and live with us.
We cannot live with you. You're different. You've got no feelings.
Feelings? I do not understand that word.
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear. Have you no emotions, sir?
Come to Mondas and you will have no need of emotions. You will become like us.
Like you?
We have freedom from disease, protection against heat and cold, true mastery. Do you prefer to die in misery?
But look, surely it's possible for us not to lose all its energy.
It is inevitable.
Then you don't mind if we all die?
Why should we mind?
Why? Why?
Because millions and millions of people are going to suffer and die horribly.
We shall not be affected.
Don't you think of anything except yourselves?
We are equipped to survive. We are only interested in survival. Anything else is of no importance. Your death will not affect us.
But I can't make you understand. You're condemning us all to die. Have you no heart?
No. That is one of the weaknesses that we have removed.
And welcome back. And as befits such a big occasion, we've invited on the big cheese himself, Sir Jim Cameron of the Mutoid podcast. Hello, Jim.
Oh, you can't smell me from there, can you? Yes. Thank you for the intro. I think
Le Grand Fromage. It's nice to have you back. It's good to hear you again. And
thank you.
Congratulations on the Mutoid podcast. That's shaping up to be all kinds of fun.
Oh, God bless you. Thanks very much. It's very good fun to do. Like all podcasts, you hurl yourself out to the void and hope other people might find it mildly diverting.
It's excellent.
And it seems some people have, so that's all to the good.
So that's the fun part out of the way for you, Jim. Now, unfortunately, Iain?
Yes, Jim, it is time once again for you to face the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
Fantastic.
Wow.
That was brilliant.
Once more with fiddling.
Yes, Jim, defeat the Mind Probe. and you will be returned to your customary place in time and space.
Huzzah.
But if you fail in your quest, Castellan Cockram's palms are literally itching to toss you into the time lash.
Yeah, quite vigorously.
So, are you ready for some general knowledge quiz fun?
Yeah, well, I hope it's easy, because I really don't like the feeling of tinsel on my flesh.
That's not what you said last time, Jim.
You should have seen me at Christmas. It was awful.
I did. I've got the internet. Anyway, let's get this beast going. Question 1, Jim. Which future British Prime Minister was born in October of 1966 when this story was broadcast?
Joris Bonson.
I'm afraid it wasn't. It was the other one, Sir David of Cameron, who was born on October the 9th.
Who I'm delighted to say is no relation.
Well, good. Yes. Question 2. Which swinging movie director, who grossed over $1 billion for 2 installments of a superhero trilogy, was born in Flushing, Queens in October 1966?
Oh, God. I don't watch superhero stuff.
Well, your other clue there was the use of the word swinging.
Oh.
Which, in this example, doesn't relate to dodgy sex parties, as far as we know.
Oh, is it Spider-Man?
No, it's Jon Favreau from the movie Swingers, who directed the Iron Man, but he did 1 and 2. He didn't direct Iron Man 3. That was Shane Black.
All right. By the way, I didn't think the director was Spider-Man. I was just trying to get a clue as to.
That would be very good if Spider-Man
been.
interrupted the next film to direct a movie. That'd be awesome. Okay, so there's no pressure, but you've got 3 questions left, and you need to get them all right, or Mark's going to toss you. So, question 3. October the 21st, 1966, and 116 school children were killed in an avalanche where?
Oh, God, is that the Welsh mining town, is it?
It is, so I'm going to give you the point, even though you clearly can't remember the name of the disaster, which is Aberfan.
Aberfan, yes.
Aberfan. So that really
horrible.
contextualises when this story was broadcast. Question 4. Which Premiership football team owner was born in Sarakov on October the 24th, 1966?
Oh, is it Chelsea, the Chelsea owner?
It is Chelsea. It is Roman Abramovich.
Yes.
Okay, final question. It's all to play for. It's do or die. It's also quite a hard one and possibly subjective, so no pressure. But brace yourself. The 10th planet features the first appearance of the Cybermen, and the next story broadcast features the Daleks. When was the next time a Cyberman story would lead into a Dalek story?
Ooh.
Oh, lummy. Well, it's not going to be Pertwee because it didn't have any. So, am I allowed to do my thinking aloud?
You can do as much thinking as you want.
I'll show my working.
Yeah, show your working.
Yes. So, what have we got? Weird in Space. No, we haven't got any Cybermen after. We haven't got any Daleks after that. What's before Evil of the Daleks? Is it? Oh God. Is it Cybermen into Dalek or Dalek into Cybermen?
Cybermen into Dalek.
All right, so it's not too.
Yeah, I see where Jim was going with that
into
one.
evil. Yeah. Oh God. I'm going to have to pass.
Well, and this is very much up for discussion, and I'm sure people will probably message us on Twitter and call me an idiot.
Oh,
but
God.
Having looked through it, I would say, when I'm not including the Doctor Falls into Twice Upon a Time, because although Twice Upon a Time had a Dalek in it, it's not a Dalek story. So
No.
I've got Ascension of the Cybermen Timeless Children into Revolution of the Daleks from 2020.
Oh.
Well done you.
Yes, that was literally 10 minutes of flicking through the name of every single Doctor Who story and trying to think which of them had those baddies in it. So, so it's bad news for you, Jim. Once we finish the recording, you're going to be bundled out the back of the podcast booth and summarily tossed akimbo into the time lash.
Yeah.
Well, that extra work was worthwhile, then, wasn't it, for you, Ian? I know that's what you wanted.
So it looks like the Mutoid podcast is just going to become a one-man show from now on. It's,
Yes, someone tell Martin I hate him.
Well, that's perked me up no end. Looking forward to that. Anyway, before we get on to disposing of Jim, we should probably talk about the 10th planet.
Why not?
Yes. First exposure to this one. I'm going to come to Jim first. How did you first experience this story? Was it the Target novel, or would it have been the video release?
It was the Target novel. Not one of my favourites, I have to admit. I'm not sure. I probably owned it at some point. I probably got it eventually. I'll have to dig through my collection, but I do remember getting that one out of the library because I didn't really like it that much.
Oh,
so I got it out once and thought, okay. And then, when it got time, when I wanted something to read,
I got it out in the library once, but I got into all kinds of trouble.
Well, your zip was too loud. Is that the problem?
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I'm slightly afraid to ask now. Ian, what's your first experience of this story?
So I can tell you exactly where I got my copy from, but it was again the Target novel, and it was bought. Probably in my first year of big school. At the end of the day, we'd get off the bus, and there was a second-hand bookshop halfway up Colchester's lovely East Hill.
How convenient!
And I'd pop in there, and whatever lunch money I'd managed to save, I would spend on fresh Target books. And I remember getting the 10th Planet. I feel like it was autumn. It would have been 88, I think, or 89.
Was it Tuesday?
I can't be that specific. My spreadsheet crashed, and I can't access that kind of data. But it was 40p. It felt like a very momentous book. It was described in very momentous terms, and the blurb on the back left you in no doubt this was a huge development in Doctor Who, but it wasn't a great read, I found.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, my first exposure was the Target novel as well. I can't recall if I bothered to read the blurb, because I saw it was Cybermen and thought, oh, that's cool, let's read that. So I think it would have come as quite a surprise to me that the Doctor regenerated at the end of it, because back in the good old days in Blighty, we never had repeats and what have you. So yeah, it would have been the Target novel for me as well. Very striking cover illustration by, was it a Chris Achilleos one?
With the purple and the Cybermen's, yes.
Yeah, it's got
I'm trying to wonder
plasma thing at the top, so it's probably Achilleos, isn't it?
He did.
It's just true.
He did like to chuck gobbets of plasma around willy-nilly. Don't
Kept
laugh.
getting on his artwork, didn't he?
I'm trying to remember if that book had one of those little "The Changing Face of Doctor Who" notes in the inside cover, telling you that.
I seem to remember it's got like a potted history of the Cybermen.
Yes.
As opposed to the Changing Face of Doctor Who.
Oh. Given that this is their first appearance, that must have been really quite a brief potted history.
Well, that said, it's if I remember, it says how they originally came from Telos and that they went to Mondas latterly.
Oh, fucking... Did David Banks write this?
He must have had a heart attack if he tried to work that back into the Cybermen canon.
And then there was Halley's Comet, and then there was some criminals in the underground.
Yeah. They can't leave it alone, can they?
They can't. But anyway, that's when we first encountered the story. When did everyone first watch what there is of it?
I think it must have been... I think I might have seen a clip of the regeneration, but I think probably I would have, if I had to guess, I'd say it was probably on UK Gold in the 90s, if they showed it. The memory cheats.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they showed anything that wasn't complete. I can't remember because I didn't have it, so I kind of learned secondhand about what they were doing. But my brother had a friend who was able to tape them for him, so I used to watch them with my brother. But I don't remember this one. I think I had to wait until the official VHS came out, and I don't know what they did about Part 4 on the VHS. Can you remember?
I never really collected that many of the VHS tapes, so I would guess they probably had some sort of telesnap reconstruction.
Yeah, they did fairly primitive ones back in the VHS days, didn't they?
Yeah,
and probably quite truncated. But rather than using the full soundtrack, which you would do now, wouldn't you? They tended to do kind of slightly potted version in those days.
A little cut down.
Yeah, maybe that's what they did with that. I honestly don't remember. But then, of course, the DVD came out with the animated episode 4.
Yes, which I thought was excellent. It can be a bit... the mileage can vary a bit on the animations, but I thought it was really impressive.
Yeah, it's fairly primitive compared to some of the others, I think, but it works somehow, doesn't it?
It's got a kind of anime feel to it.
Yeah.
Even down to the... I mean, I'm not I'm not an artist or anything like that. I'm sure Simon Brett or someone would tell me what the technical term is, but it looks like... I noticed a lot in Japanese animation that you watch as a kid. It's like they dropped frames of animation, so it's a bit more sort of juddery.
Yes.
Rather than that sort of really smooth animation you would see on Disney or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I really like it.
Yeah, I think it works well enough, I think.
I haven't seen the animated version, so just to bring Jim and the listeners up to speed, I'm now using American BritBox, which has precisely 6 episodes for Series 4 of Doctor Who, and they're all the power of the Daleks. So I was forced to visit the Electric Tinterweb and watch the 3 live action episodes, and then a perfectly serviceable recon. And I first saw it on Tuesday, and I watched it again this morning.
Wowzers. Yeah, it's quite a momentous episode, not just because of the change of the lead actor, but it really ushers in a lot of what would become staples in the coming years.
Yeah, the Doctor's kind of sidelined in this one, and meanwhile the show kind of jumps tracks onto what we know it's going to become ever increasingly. It's Base Under Siege.
Yeah.
It is the Cybermen, and the Doctor's really I don't want to say irrelevant. He's not unable to get to grips with what's happening, but for whatever reason he just doesn't seem to really work in this story.
Well, it's quite odd, isn't it? Because this story, his plan is to do nothing, isn't it? Because it's a kind of weird approach to an historical, isn't it? Because to him this is an historical.
Yeah.
He knows what's going to happen, that Mondas is going to absorb too much energy from the Earth and then explode. So he's basically trying to stop Cutler doing anything completely mental before that happens, isn't he? So his plan of action is inaction, which is going to remove him out of the fray quite a lot, as well as a bout of bronchitis does in episode 3. So it's plot-wise, it's not the best one for him to leave on. You want him to leave on in a blaze of glory, don't you? In a story where he has a massive part in the resolution, and he just doesn't, because he isn't required to by the story.
Yeah, it's a bit lacking in hero moments, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Hartnell tries to create those moments by being, really cross in episode 2 and at the start of episode 4, when he's still got a few lines to say. He delivers them with the intensity and the fury as if they were a fantastic climax for his character, Jim. Yeah. But
I didn't say anything.
But it doesn't work because of what he's saying and who he's saying it to, and that's a really interesting point about the Doctor, it being a historical from his point of view and a fixed point, and he mustn't do anything. But if he'd only said that to Ben or Polly, so we understood why he was just sitting in an armchair in the corner of Snowcap Base looking waspish, that would have been fine. But as it just, and I think the reason I watched this all the way through, both times. I found the direction brilliant. I found the pacing brilliant. It was a really good thriller. It did have the Doctor in it for a little bit here and there, but I didn't let that stop me. And I don't think the makers let that stop them either. And it was just a relentlessly good sort of sci-fi thriller.
Yeah, it feels like a sort of a black and white B movie, doesn't it? Really, the whole thing, and they use some stock music, don't they, throughout? Some of which is very cinematic. So, yeah, if you're to watch it in that kind of format, it's roughly an hour and a half long, isn't it? It's kind of film length. If you watch it in one sitting, it's like that. It's like a film that almost doesn't have Doctor Who in it as well.
Yeah, of course, the first use of space adventure, which gets used rather a lot in the 60s.
Yeah, particularly with the Cybermen, but not exclusively, which is quite surprising, isn't it? As you get, as you get further along, yeah. The other thing about Hartnell in this is that, again, in the last story for a Doctor, you'd like to see his full range, wouldn't you? I don't think, and this might be to do with the Part 4 being animated, I don't think you see his sort of twinkle as you do in everything beyond the first 3 stories of his reign. He begins to be a bit more sort of avuncular, doesn't he? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the business, but it is part of the character and it lightens him up a bit. I think he's quite dour in this because, like you say, and he's angry most of the time and sort of shagged out for the rest of it, so you don't really get any of those twinkly moments. I think there's a bit that might be in Part 4, but again, you can't really tell because you're only working for the soundtrack and what the animators have decided to put in the frame. I suppose
it's also quite tricky from a production point of view when you've got a lead actor who is poorly and has to leave the production at very short notice. It does mean that you're having to give lines to other actors to try and keep the story going. And do you feel that worked?
Well, Ben is often resourceful, isn't he? He's resourceful in a slightly more technical and scientific way than you would expect in this because he's getting some of Hartnell's original lines, isn't he? And there's quite a lot of well, the Doctor said, well, he must have said it off. He must have said it off screen because we didn't see him saying that. So I mean, they try and work around the fairly sudden disappearance of the leading actor.
You've got one of the scientists on the station as well who kind of steps in as well, so I think they do a reasonable job with that, considering.
I think so. It's Barclay, isn't it? Barclay gets he gets some of the technical stuff that he perhaps might not know, but with his scientific background, he might kind of interpolate from what's going on. And so it does work without too much grinding with gears, I think.
I'm just thinking it through, and obviously it was very clever the way they gave Ben the extra material, but he still would have had to have been in that room with the sleeping Doctor in order to climb into the air vent that led miraculously through into the rocket silo. So probably nothing would have been very different if Hartnell had been there for episode 3, except perhaps he would have sabotaged the rocket. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, I feel, but and bogged down in the minutiae of the storytelling. But I think it was pretty seamless, and that's I think because Ben is the sort of companion who can convincingly sell that he's got enough technical savvy to figure things out and do these kind of things. Someone like Katerina might have struggled if she'd been asked to unscrew a panel on a rocket and remove a pin from a plug. But and I think also because it is a fairly breathlessly paced story, unlike some of the historicals, which felt a lot more plodding and onerous, you are swept along by this in such a way that you don't notice any inconsistencies from one episode to the next, and you don't necessarily feel like it's kind of been improvised around actor availability or things like that. So I think it despite a lot of issues, I think it's a really good bit of telly.
Yeah, certainly watching it in the order that we are, just in the broadcast order, it's obviously a new twist on storytelling, which we'll see if by the end of the season we're still feeling like it's one that works, because I do feel it's something they tend to rely on quite a lot in future stories, not wishing to spoil you too much, Ian. But I think it works really well in this story. I think as a production it's really good. I think for something that is studio based, I think it looks great considering what they've got to work with budget-wise. I think the Cybermen, certainly as a kid I found them really creepy, and then as your typical teen I looked at them and thought, oh, they look a bit like they're held together with sellotape and they're not very impressive. But of course they've been rehabilitated over the years, and particularly thanks to Mr. Moffat and his efforts. I think personally they're one of the most scary versions of the Cybermen.
Yeah, I think so. And part of that, I think, is due to the kind of better resolution we have these days to look at them, because you can see the actor's eyes behind the eye holes now, whereas I'm not sure you could see that in VHS, certainly.
No.
And certainly not the sort of versions that was exchanging hands, before.
I think that's kind of what makes them a bit more creepy. You still feel like there is something left of them in the hands as well.
Yes, that's very definitely what it is. It's the myth of the Cybermen. As I started watching with Peter Davison, and when the Cybermen turn up, they're these kind of cuddly Darth Vader voiced robots, and it's only from the background reading I was doing as a kid that I knew that they'd originally been people, and there was that body horror element to them. But here in their first story, you absolutely get that from the word go. And it is genuinely creepy, and the way they talk, by just opening their mouths and all the dialogue comes out of somewhere, and then they close their mouth again. That it is genuinely really creepy in a way that they wouldn't get to be again until
World Enough and Time.
That's the one. Thank you. Yes.
I think the masks work really well. I'm not entirely convinced about the chest units. They are massive, and I can imagine as an actor in the studio heat, it could have been not the most comfortable of jobs to get.
They've got loads of batteries in them as well, haven't they? Again, watching the DVD version, you can see that the lights are flashing all the time on them. They look actually technically quite interesting. Again, I didn't really notice that until watching this. But there's huge batteries, and the battery technology is brilliant now, but then it was absolutely terrible. So they're like lugging probably car batteries around inside those things.
So I thought they were like giant space accordions, and there's that bit in episode 4 where 2 or 3 of the Cybermen start talking to each other, and it all gets very sing-song. And I was wondering if they were going to use these accordions to, really burst into a number about "we're going to conquer the earth."
The problem with the voices, I think Roy Skelton's got a pretty good handle on it. And they're pretty good. But Peter Hawkins gets introduced. He was one of the Dalek voices, wasn't he? He gets introduced in part 4, and he is all over the place when he does it. And it becomes quite laughable. He's all over the place when he takes it.
That's right. And that's why it sounded like a sort of very bad rock opera was starting. It's interesting that Skelton and Hawkins did the voices, because I hadn't realised that Roy Skelton had been the original Cyberman voice and a Dalek voice. It kind of legitimises now the grip that Nick Briggs has on doing all the voices of everything all the time.
But has Nick Briggs ever done Zippy?
What a mental image that is.
I'm sure Big Finish will be doing a rainbow.
Oh yes, Jeffrey. Oh, harder, Nicholas. Oh yes.
Cast-wise, it's we've kind of moved on a bit from some of our contemporary settings. I mean, we are now at least acknowledging that people of colour exist, so that's good. But there are some fairly stereotypical sort of American Italian accents going on.
My favourite is the Italian, who is coded as Italian because he likes opera and pornography. I think that's fantastic.
And he uses an accent when he remembers, but it may not even be Italian. It didn't sound very Italian.
Do you think he was related to the tour guide at the top of the Empire State Building from The Chase?
Well, I think that one of the soldiers is very like that, isn't he? I think he gets killed quite early on. But he's very New York, isn't he?
Yeah. There's a Goyle.
Yes.
He's during that bit, he's looking through a periscope and he says, "All I see is snow, snow, snow. We're in the South Pole, what do you expect?"
Herds of wildebeest sweeping majestically over.
Exactly.
So Earl Cameron, who played I believe television's first black astronaut in this story. So
is that right?
There's an example of Doctor Who being in some small way, progressive. But then you counter that with the guy in sort of national dress at the UN office who gets nothing to do apart from holding a piece of paper. So it's kind of it does some good, but it also underwhelms at the same time. But on the whole, I think it's good. Otherwise, that North Pole. Listen to me, what a fool! That South Pole base was just full of middle-aged white men. So you'd assume all the posters would actually be for cars or something like that. It just had a really awful, boring, terrible office kind of vibe going on.
I thought, considering they're working with pretty small studios at that time, they managed to get a bit of height into it by having the different layers in the control room, which I thought was something a bit different and gave it a bit of scale and scope.
Yeah, it's good. Plus, you get that kind of concealed entrance, don't you, almost where the Cybermen come through, kind of high up in the picture, so we can see them before people on the lower levels can see them, which adds to the fun, I think.
Yeah,
there's a bit where at least one Cyberman walks past Cutler without him noticing. You kind of.
I mean, they weren't the greatest at picking out the Cybermen. When you've got the big reveal at the beginning where the guys come back from having gone to get the cutting equipment, and there's the two of them stood there with their backs to them facing towards the police box, and you think, hang on a minute, they're at least like 3 or 4 feet taller than they were when we left. I mean, surely that's a bit of a giveaway, but
there's a guy going, is that you, Tito? Is that you? Well, if he's split into 4 different giant silver people, then yes, it is.
If he's holding a specialist magazine, then yes, it possibly is.
If he turned around and started doing, an aria.
No, that's not. Yeah,
Madam Butterfly or something.
That's not Snow.
But I think the set was actually really quite brilliant for that reason, because you can't see the entrance. You just see the Cybermen sort of marching in. Because in the rocket silo, you've got that kind of height and depth to it. You get Ben climbing down the ladder to reach the rocket, and then Cutler throws him down the side of the rocket shaft, and you'll have to pardon me for using the word shaft. You've got this real sense of depth to the place, even though it's buried under the snow. So I don't know how deep that would have to go, but let's not dwell on that. And again, the only slight problem with the set was that when the Doctor and Ben were locked in that little room, there you could see the number 7 on the inside of the door, like people are going to wake up and go, oh, but which numbered room am I in? Oh, thank God, number 7, yes, there we go. On the whole, I think set design wise, this was a real success. I'm going to counter that immediately, however, by at the start of episode 2, we see the television studio of the International Television News broadcast, which is the set dressing for that is one A4 sheet of paper on which someone has printed the words International Television News. And this is an international television news broadcast, which is shown with one language on that sign. It's broadcast in English, and I don't feel it's really living up to its billing there.
Well, it's the future, for people watching then. So, by that stage, the British Empire has taken over the entire world.
By 1986, the whole planet will be speaking English and watching poorly rendered news broadcasts.
Well, you remember, it's not that long ago. That's what it was like, wasn't it?
If only they'd sort of guessed hello, hello was going to happen. And that's literally all I can remember from 1986. Hello, hello. My God.
You've written off the entire Colin Baker era.
Yeah, I have, and I'm not alone in that.
Yeah.
But let's hold our fire there. We'll be talking about the Colin Baker era in
You're jumping ahead
10, 12 years. And I, for one, can't wait. We could record it now as a little footnote to this.
No, you're all right.
I could do it in one sentence. It's not even a sentence, is it? Let's be honest.
Well, I'm going to be dispatched into one of his worst props of his era at the end of this. So
yes, you are.
I've got a vested interest.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
worst or best, depending which way you look at it.
at least some members of the cast got to get out of that story halfway through by jumping into the time lash.
Some of them
rest
unscripted, I expect.
Yeah, bugger this for a game of soldiers. I'm off.
Jim, I was just going to ask how you rate Ben and Polly amongst the companions.
I think they suffer from the fact that we can't see everything they were in. That said, I always enjoy the stories they're in. I mean, Ben is almost always angry, which I think is perhaps slightly too much. But he's proactive and he's committed to everything he does, isn't he? Which is fun. Polly is variable depending who's writing her, I think. I mean, she's very good in the Highlanders. She gets quite a lot of interesting stuff to do. In here, she's making coffee again.
It's becoming a bit of a trope, isn't it?
Yeah, and she's a bit of sort of damsel in distress when Ben gets her out of that horrible chair in the Cybermen spaceship. But she has an interesting chat, didn't she, about... you got the Cybermen talking about this very utilitarian...
She stands up to them because, they're quite intimidating, and she doesn't seem to... She's not like she's not standing in the background screaming or anything. She goes right up to them and starts having a go. Yeah,
she's not saying, I hope they don't look at me, I'll sit in the corner. So she stands up then. But also she has an interesting chat later on. She's with Barclay, but when they're talking about Cutler's son in that capsule, and she says, well, that's one life, when all the people on Earth is on the other side of the scale sort of thing. We're going to have to get rid of him in order to save all the others, which is an interesting counterpoint to the conversation she had with the Cybermen earlier on. So she gets what she gets to do is good, but doesn't get to do enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment.
The main problem with sidelining the TARDIS crew in this is that there is less for Ben and Polly to do. However, what they do when they're given the opportunity is so good that it kind of works, and Ben and Polly continue to kind of not improve, because they start strongly and they continue strongly, but they continue, I think, to surprise me with how good they are, because I think by this time it's like the 4th or 5th or 6th change of companions, and it's become a bit of a revolving door, and the companions assume less overall importance, get less backstory, and just kind of become more of a plot function. But I really like these two, and Ben is always angry, apart from that bit where he's locked up in the base's projection room, which is used for Tito's Porno Tuesdays, and starts talking to himself. That's a little bit...
In the Target novel, it's a Roger Moore James Bond movie.
Oh, God. I know what I'd rather watch. I'm with Tito on this one. But I think Ben is always very angry and very earnest. But then he would be, because he's a sailor, he's a man of action. And he's never been more at sea, you may argue, than when confronted by the children of Mondas. Thank you. I thought that aspect was really good. I think it's just it must have been a really unenviable kind of brief to kind of carry the show into series 4, knowing that at any minute the script you're given could change before you go in front of the cameras, because the lead guy, who is by now on a week-by-week guest star contract, might not turn up. Then they've got the introduction of let's not get ahead of ourselves, but they've got what happens quite soon coming up. So they're never really given a chance to bed in, because they're kind of moving pieces which, more than any other time in the show's history, have been required to be used in service of the plot or in service of cast members who aren't well enough to perform. So it gives them a really shaky foundation, and I think the fact that they are both clearly so brilliant shows that they've really kind of just moved past those limitations as performers and really own it. And it's, I was reading a thing about how Michael Craze, never really went on to become like a big star. And that does kind of seem a bit strange.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame, really, because I
Yeah.
think he's really good in the role.
Very good.
Annika Wills is always singing his praises. At the time she thought he would be the next big thing, didn't she? And he's got the kind of the Adam Faith kind of look as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, very 60s.
Yeah, Adam Faith also a brilliant actor, as it turned out. It's one of those people like it's the same with Elvis, wasn't it? You push him into films, thinking we'll put bums on seats, and they tend to be really good. And he was it's odd that he did so little. I think he had more of a career before Doctor Who than he did afterwards, because he does some. I'm not sure he was ever a child actor, but he did act quite. He was in things quite young, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have been relatively experienced, for his age by this time, I think, on Doctor Who.
Yeah. Now, Iain, you alluded to. Yeah, we're going to have to broach it at some point. The regeneration. I mean, they mention a couple of times in passing that he's looking a bit peaky and
he's a bit tired.
This old body of mine's wearing a bit thin and what have you.
He's looking a bit like Patrick Trout.
Yeah, I mean, there's not an awful lot to lead you to believe that this is his swan song. I think it was put in the newspapers, wasn't it, at the time that Troughton would be taken over. So the audience watching would probably have known that this was going to be his final one.
Yeah, I think that may be shown in the figures. The audience figures that steadily rise during this. Might partly due to the instant success of the Cybermen, because people like them straight away, didn't they? But I don't think they were able to, or even tried to hide the fact that the actor would change. So, I suppose you don't know when he's going to change. You just know this is the last story, so you'll be tuning in where you perhaps towards the end, expecting it to happen at some point, and it does in the very last frame almost.
Yeah, considering all the options that they tried previously, I think we can all be quite thankful that this was the one they settled on in the end. Well,
I think it's important that it's something that the Doctor does himself rather than an exterior force, because there was a chance that it was something that the Celestial Toymaker would have done to him when he's invisible. Yeah. I think there was another chance in the Savages that process he underwent would have caused the change of actor. But then how do you do the next change of actor if those two things have caused it? So you have to do something that is either to do with the Doctor or the TARDIS or both, which you kind of get the feeling this is, because there's the TARDIS materialisation noise as he regenerates.
Yes, which is handled a bit differently in the book.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you remember the book. Just to catch up, I cheated and listened to the audiobook read by Annika Wills, and the whole regeneration scene plays out quite differently from the one that's presented on screen.
Oh, really?
So Ben and Polly get back to the TARDIS and there's no sign of the Doctor, so they change out of their winter clothes they've been wearing outside and they start to head back towards the console room. They hear this cry and they go to what they describe as a sleeping pod, which the Doctor has told them is designed to compress sleep. And they slide back the top of the pod, and they're like, "Oh yes, that's the Doctor. That's his cloak and what have you." But his face is covered. And then when they pull back the cloak, he's changed.
Oh, really?
Which is quite different.
Oh, that's weird. The actual change of effect that they use. It's a simple, 2 camera feeds. They position Troughton on the floor somewhere and Hartnell on the floor somewhere else, and then mix the two things. But they used a camera that they knew was dodgy.
Yes, that's right. I saw that.
And when they merge the shots, the fault of this camera causes that flaring. So that kind of adds to the effect and kind of blurs the changing from one face to another in a way.
When you consider they're doing that effectively live, it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely live. Yeah, and it's miles better than you see it without the effect in Planet of the Spiders, isn't it? Where they just do a simple mix, don't they? Crossfade to change Bertrude to Baker, and that's just feeble, isn't it? But this works really well.
I don't think there was any sign of any kind of ginger wigs or anything either.
Not this time.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose the writer's natural instinct might have been to have the Doctor in Part 4 have that kind of big dramatic showdown with the Cybermen, or some kind of he absorbs the radiation from the rods. We'll come back to that in a second. It does something momentous which causes him to regenerate. But obviously, given the frailty of William Hartnell, they probably thought the best they could ask him to do was, lay down on the floor and just have whatever happened to him happen as maybe a symbiotic process with the TARDIS or whatever. But the real interesting point in all this is that they were thinking they were thinking far enough ahead to recast the part of the Doctor. But by not fleshing it out or explaining what was happening or why, they were kind of, I suppose, simultaneously strengthening the future of the show and at the same time weakening it, because if we don't know...
It's kept pretty vague.
If we don't know what it is, then we don't know if future teams of writers can do the same thing.
You're not sure if it's the TARDIS that's doing it, or if it's the Doctor's physiognomy that's doing it, or... Yeah.
Do we have any sense of how this went down with the public at the time?
I think there's a bit of a reaction to it, looking at the the kind of the vox pops about Power of the Daleks when Troughton starts. I think there's a bit of negative reaction to it, as long with some good reaction as well. I expect at this stage...
Well, it's not as good as it used to be. Doctor Who's dead.
Not my Doctor.
But I expect people were so confused at the end of episode 4 of this that who knows what they were thinking, or whether they were able to form an opinion enough to tell the BBC about it. The message is
also where it sort of sits in the season as well, because pretty much from this point on it becomes something that happens at the end of a season, whereas this is your second story into the season, so it's an unusual place in the sort of run of stories as well.
Normally, the end of a season, end of a Doctor, but this was, you get the feeling Hartnell could have carried on or been got rid of at any point from realistically halfway through series 3. So it just happened when things reached a pretty pass. But my problem with it, pretending I've never seen any of the rest of the show, and I've just watched these 29 Hartnell stories, for it to happen in this kind of plot isolation where no explanation is given, there's a word. I'm going to pretend that's a legitimate American word. Given, I'm just standing by it. It reminds me very much of, again, World Enough and Time, where you've got the two most recent iterations of the Master, and they both kill each other. And then for another Master to turn up the following year or whatever with no explanation. Yeah. And I know people are like, oh, it's the Master, oh, it happens, it doesn't matter, blah-de-blah. Yeah. I really do want to know how Missy regenerated. Sorry. So I think at the time I'd have been one of the people on sort of 1966 Twitter going, wow, this is outrageous. No explanation.
The thing is that people by then were used to lead actors being recast, but then within the fiction that was never addressed. You're just supposed to accept that this was,
this is actually written into the story.
Yeah, this is actually within the fiction, yet it isn't really explained at the same time.
I mean, if they'd cast another, 50-something actor and given him the same wig, they could have just claimed, it's just recast, but it's the same Doctor, and and we could still be doing that to this day. My God, but they didn't.
I'm not sure it would have run on quite as long.
No, they made a very specific decision to get the 46-year-old Patrick Troughton in, who was a very different look and build and style of actor. So it was very much a decision that no, this is a different physical being occupying the same, or he's got the same brain, he's got the same memories, but he's a completely different person. So they're kind of, trolling the audience, going, look, there's something big here, but we're not going to tell you about it. We're not going to explain it. We're just going to crack on with monsters in the downstairs toilet for another 3 years. It's a really interesting decision.
Yeah, I think from what I gathered, Hartnell was really quite tickled by the fact that it was Troughton that was replacing him, because I think he had a great deal of respect for him as an actor.
Yeah, he's apparently on record for saying the only person that that he thought could take over was Patrick Troughton. You know, the best sort of character actor of his, well, not necessarily of his generation, but of the BBC could call upon, I suppose.
Edward Hardwicke must have been kicking himself not to get the nod. He's like, but I've done this. I can do this. I'm a dead ringer for him.
Well, he would have been able to pick up a Beatles wig quite easily in 1966, so maybe he was hoping he was still going to get a bit of work out of it.
The thing is, they don't use them, do they? They use a different extra, don't they, for episode 3, don't they, when they do, oh, what's happened to him? He's fainted.
Oh,
all
yeah,
that stuff
that's right, yeah.
on the floor. It's not him, so he doesn't get a send-off.
No.
Whereas Hartnell does, but he doesn't.
Very sad. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll probably talk about this again next time when we talk about Power of the Daleks. But I'm intrigued at the kind of street fighting attitude of the production team to completely recast the part without making it slightly more clear what was going on. But anyway, unless anyone has anything else to say on the subject of that, I think we should spend a couple more minutes talking about the Cybermen, because these Cybermen, they've got names.
They do.
There's I've written them down. There's Krang, there's Tampon, and there's Doris Parsons. And those are just the ones and Jarlsberg.
And don't forget Jeffrey.
Jeffrey the Cyberman. Alan the Cyberman. Thank God in retrospect that didn't carry on, because they were not great sort of space names.
Oh, well, you obviously haven't listened to Spare Parts by Big Finish.
No, I haven't. And again, you know, it's this original conception of the Cybermen. They have names, they have hands, they have mouths and eyeballs that you can see. There's body horror. They are a people. It's a very different offering from every other iteration of the Cybermen, which is just they're all robots who sound the same.
Even the next story, they're just robots already in the Mondas, aren't they? Indistinguishable from robots.
And it's one of those examples of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, isn't it? Because clearly, having now watched The 10th Planet, the Cybermen, when they were originally introduced, were brilliant, and they never have been since. So,
well, we'll see about that, young Iain.
Well, I'm not saying there haven't been great Cyberman stories, but they do not represent the body horror that they were conceived to represent until later Capaldi, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting that they should be in this story, isn't it? I mean, they're all about prolonging life by unusual means, aren't they?
Yeah.
As is regeneration. So the Doctor prolongs his life. He doesn't die as a result of his body getting worn out. He has his own way of prolonging life. And then you think the Cybermen, because they thought that they were going to lose the Daleks because Terror Nation wanted to flog them in America. You think the Cybermen were brought in to replace them. They're very similar ideas, aren't they? This are remnants of a dying race trapped in a metal shell. All the emotions have gone for Cybermen. All the pleasant emotions have come from the Daleks.
Yeah. I suppose you've got the added thing of they want to convert you to be like them, which is
that's what's going
a nice twist.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because the other thing is that they've also got distinctive voices you can imitate in the playground. So,
like the Daleks,
Like the Daleks, so that's it. But in terms of making this a strong offering to compete with the Daleks, you take two horror staples, Frankenstein's monster and vampires. You've got Frankenstein's monster, who's made out of spare parts, and you've got vampires who turn you into them. So you're using two very strong ideas in a very similar added to something that's very similar to the extremely successful Daleks to replace the Daleks. And whilst some of these things remain later on, as Iain was saying, the real punch of the Cybermen in this is lost by the very next story they're in,
which is in about 3 weeks' time. So it's not like they could have resurrected them after a large number of years had passed and thought, oh yes, let's spruce them up a bit. They just turned away from that aesthetic.
Yeah. Kip Pedler came up with the idea for them, and I think because he was the science guy, the scientific advisor, if you like, he was looking for scientific creations to bring into the storytelling, and at that point we were getting into heart transplants and all that kind of stuff, and so cybernetics was very much on his radar, and it was his idea to sort of look at how we're beginning to get into that sort of territory as a species, and where that could possibly go in its most extreme form.
And he did I think a mind-blowingly good job of that, and it's just a shame that by the next time the Cybermen turned up, they'd obviously forgot that bit and just went with, oh yeah, they're quite tall and they've got robotic voices, because you know these are magnificent Cybermen, and these are magnificent Cyberman voices as well. Because you know nothing says emotion like a 1980s Cyberman. They get cross, they get deeper, they go, oh, excellent. I think, you know, they're quite clearly enslaved to their emotions.
Shake their fists.
There is nothing quite as clean as this for being expressionless and showing no emotion. It's perfect.
Yeah, you can't imagine one of them having a well-prepared meal, can you?
You certainly can't.
No.
There is not enough salt on this chicken breast.
Well, the thing is, they're so polite, aren't they, in this? Because they properly don't have any emotions, so they don't get angry, they don't get aggressive, really. No. I mean, they raise their arm, you know, to stop you from doing something. But they're polite because they're logical, aren't they? They go. Yeah. The two things go together, don't they?
And this leads to my favourite moment in the story, which is the comedy moment, where Polly says, "Don't you have hearts?" And they go, "No, we do not have hearts. They have been removed." And it's kind of a background throwaway comment, but it's just so funny. That I loved it. So this for me is just such a great story, because the villains are so strong, and I would have looked forward to seeing these Cybermen again.
Yeah, of course we don't do until the end of Capaldi. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you've got these non-emotional Cybermen who, they're obviously they're doing what they want to do, and we're a sort of byproduct of that. But the real villain through most of this is Cutler, and he's a menace because of his emotions. Yeah,
he's the one who's going to put everything at risk if he uses the Z-bomb.
Yeah, he's going to use the Z-bomb. Everything is. I mean, it's
Z for Zippy.
The Z for Zippy.
Bungle.
Yes. I expect even these Cybermen don't have families, but I mean, even with names, I guess they don't have families unless they've got surnames as well. But the whole family thing is weakening Cutler's position and affecting his decisions and stuff. So he becomes a menace. If anyone's going to press the button, it's going to be him because of emotions. But the other thing is, emotions don't win, do they? It's a technical problem that the Cybermen, haven't overcome. And the other thing is that Barclay is relatively calm when you compare him to Cutler, but he's the sort of logical scientist, and he becomes the biggest ally of the Doctor and the others because he isn't particularly emotional and he is logical. So it's a really rich text, I think, either by accident or by design.
Yeah.
I think that's an amazing point that I hadn't really thought about, or I'm not intelligent enough to have realised that. I think it's kind of counterpoised with the way Mondas is kind of conveniently got rid of really quite quickly, because it just absorbed too much power, which reminds me of a MacBook that I had, and I left it plugged in, and I went on a business trip to Beirut.
Oh dear.
And I was only there for like 4 or 5 days, and I came back and the thing had sort of buckled and bulged where the battery had just absorbed too much power.
Blimey.
And that was the end of that. So visually I loved the Mondas kind of
breaking up,
melting and breaking up, although obviously having only watched that in Recon, I don't know if I got what would have been originally broadcast. But that aspect of it, now this is where the episode doesn't necessarily bear up to too much textual analysis. They were twin planets, and then Mondas, and I'm doing the big arm gesture, Mondas floated away to the edge of space. Now planets can't do that because it wouldn't have had any gravity, and it wouldn't have had the sun, it wouldn't have had the moon. Yeah.
Jim was talking about the the comparisons with the Daleks, because obviously the Daleks in the invasion of Earth were desperate to hollow out the Earth and pilot it around the universe. So it's obviously a thing with these advanced aliens. They like to pilot planets rather than spaceships.
Joyriding planets around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a pimped up Class 3 planet from Mutter Spiral. Oh, yeah. No.
Go faster rings.
Yeah.
So they're going to smash into the planet Halfords and nick loads of stuff out.
Yeah, so that bit of it was pure bobbins, and it's coming back and it's sort of floating straight at us. It's somewhere near Pluto. I mean, oh.
Well, they think we got a scientific advisor on board for this. Yeah, we got this news report saying, yes, this strange new planet is heading straight for us. Don't worry, it's not going to hit us. Well, it doesn't have to get very close for all the water to be sucked out of the oceans and all sorts.
Yep.
I mean, they do reference it a bit with the first of the spacecraft. It can't land because it keeps on being influenced by the gravity of Mondas.
Well,
it's like you say, if you analyse it too much, it's just a load of bobbins.
Yeah, I mean, do you think a scientific advisor would have a handle on that kind of thing, really? But the fiction has to take priority.
So it's like he earned his money by creating the idea of the Cybermen and this concept that biotechnology was going to potentially lead to this Frankenstein-esque race of aliens, and that was brilliant. If he'd only done as much due diligence with page 2 of his story notes, where he's plotted out Mondas. If only he'd
I think this is... We have several friends and listeners who enjoy Star Trek, and I think this is very much where we part ways, because Star Trek very much likes to focus on the science, and it's all about, you can buy technical manuals of the various spacecraft and read about how it's all put together, whereas I don't think Doctor Who, with the odd exception, doesn't really tend to get bogged down in that, and it's quite often the science is a bit wobbly in service to the story. Yes,
it's whimsy over accuracy.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay if it isn't. It's just you think you get slightly more if you bring a scientific advisor in.
Yeah, this is true.
But, maybe he was cross because they spelt his name wrong in episode 1.
Yes.
He made up some complete nonsense about flying planets to just get them to change his name.
They got embarrassing in the next story when they put the name of the lead actor up as Patrick Trumpton.
Well, Jane Pertwee was always my favourite.
Yeah, they're both livid when they saw the first episodes go. They get Gerry Davis's name wrong as well, don't they, later on?
Yeah, I can't remember how. I remember reading they did. But...
Yeah, they do it with the Davis with an E rather than without, which is how it should be.
I thought you can't spell Jerry wrong unless they're giving him the Halliwell 1 R and an I treatment. But...
I think the captions person was taken out and shot after episode 4.
What did we think of the way they souped up the credit sequence and the captions with that kind of streaming?
Yeah, this is becoming a bit of a
trope now, isn't it?
It is. We have the War Machines, and now I quite like it. And there's a bit of extra character.
It does, yeah. And isn't there a little kind of computery noise over the theme tune as well?
Yeah, there's a little
top and tail.
It's like the Vidi printer on Grandstand.
Final score.
Stenhousemuir 1, Mondas 3.
Or Mandos.
Livingston 3, Forfar 4.
Queen of the South 9, Everton 4. Yeah, that would have been good.
Oh, we better not talk about the football, have we, Iain?
No. I'm a recent convert to Brentford, and yesterday Everton did us a severe sporting discourtesy.
Yeah, well, you beat them in the league, so that's fine.
Good. Good. It's not.
I say we're even now.
Yes, we'll incorporate this into the rest of the show. Maybe we can have a little breakout chat about the relative successes of our two teams. Because I think if there's one thing Doctor Who fans traditionally love, it's football.
It's sport.
Yeah. Sport in general.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't get into Formula 1, otherwise it really will be driving everyone away.
I like your pun.
Don't worry,
there.
I'll edit all of this stuff out, but anyway.
You've got to keep that bit in, driving. Yeah. Formula 1, driving them away.
Oh, delicious.
You can't buy that. The one other point I was going to make was that the Cybermen are initially dispatched by radioactivity rather than gold, which is a much more plausible thing for them to be allergic to.
I would agree.
The problem is when Ben and Barclay decide to just strip out the reactor rods and run around the base waving them at the Cybermen. Now, we've all seen Chernobyl. We've all seen Chernobyl. We don't need Legasov to tell us that you can't remove the rods from a reactor without causing, a massive meltdown. So, again, there are some shaky elements of science, just as there are really good, well-plotted elements of science. But on the whole, I just think this was great.
Yes, I have to agree.
Well, I'm a recent convert because even the last time I watched it, I didn't think much of it. But I watched this time, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm glad. Well, this sounds like the perfect juncture for us to give it a bit of a score. I shall come to Mr. Cameron first. Jim, what would you like to give this one out of 10?
I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Okay. Hartnell was never really my favourite Doctor going into this whole venture, but I kind of, I feel quite sad that we've come to the end of his run. I think it's unfortunate that he wasn't well enough to participate in all of it, but I think it's quite an iconic story, for not just for the fact he leaves the show, but all the other things we mentioned as well, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Oh.
Iain.
So, we've not really spoken about Derek Martinez, but I think the direction was incredible. I think the sets were brilliant. I think the story, irrespective of its foundation in actual physics, was hugely enjoyable. The jeopardy was real. There were chills. There was really strong acting. There were laughs. I can't give it a 10 because it's got an episode missing, so I'm also going to give it a 9.
I'd say that's pretty solid.
I feel slightly parsimonious now, but...
You can always change your score if you want, Jim.
No, I'll stick with an 8. It's a cracking story. It's never been a favourite, although I like it a lot more now than I did. So, and it might have been ages since I watched it had you not asked me to do this. So thank you for asking me to do this, because it's
good.
Increased my enjoyment of this story.
Good. Hooray. I'm glad to hear it.
Huzzah!
Oh.
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
Huzzah! So let's hear what you guys have to say about the 10th Planet.
I've got mail.
First up, we have heard from Ben Schneider down in Indiana.
I am happy that the title of this story has never been retconned. After all, this story is set in 1986, when there were officially 9 planets. A much more civilized time. 9 planets plus Mondas equals 10. Perfect. At least Chibnall didn't screw that up. I am also looking forward to Big Finish creating the inevitable new series of box set adventures centered around the overly horny and overly Italian Private Tito. My God, what a stereotype. Oh, sure, he was, killed by Cybermen, but they'll find a way around that. They always do. And then Torchwood will come and recruit him for some reason, and I can just hear it now. Mamma mia, a sexy alien! Meets a balza! Auditions start tomorrow.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, let's kick things off with an email from Thomas Meehan. Thomas contacted us on our email address, which is mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. And Thomas has this to say. It's far from being all over. The 10th Planet is one of my favourite stories, and this was a great finale for Hartnell, who is one of my favourite incarnations of the Doctor. As for Ben and Polly, they aren't what I think of when I think of companions, but Ben was useful. Unfortunately, Polly not so much. I guess you have to put it down to the time it was made. The Cybermen don't get better than this, till the Chibnall era in my opinion. The look of them are frightening, but the sing-song voice is laughable. I love the music, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is one of the tracks reused in Troughton's era? Yeah, I think you're right there, Thomas. Whoever came up with the idea of regeneration, or renewal, as it will be known in the Power of Dalek, is a genius, and I would love to see a classic-style regeneration in New Who. The New Who version has been overused. Oh, thanks very much for that, Thomas. And we're heading over to Twitter now. I have heard from 26 Glorious Years at 7up6389. And they say, another showcase for the talents of Derek Martinus. That first slow pan to a close-up of the Cyberman staring into a camera is a terrific moment. I also confess that my impressions are forever coloured by Achilleos' striking cover and that tremendous back cover illustration too. And they give it a thumbs up. Thank you for that. Next up, I have heard from DJ Alpha T at DJ_Alpha T, our dear friend. And DJ Alpha T says, great build up, and the Cybermen are so alien, so scary that they were once us and we will soon be like them. Let down by losing Hartnell when he goes on leave. The change must have been so weird and unexpected at the time. Love it, but I wonder if I love the Target novel more. That's a nice summary. Next up, we've heard from Brad Wolf at Big Brad Wolf. See what he's done there?
Clever.
Yeah. It's my favourite Hartnell tied with The Chase. It's classy and way ahead of its time. Such a missed opportunity they didn't reshoot the entire episode in 2017 when they had the chance, but the animation is great too. Yeah, nice ideas there. Thank you. Next up, we've heard from Dan Pin at Pin Dan. This is a 2-tweet effort, so here we go. The Cybermen have never been more unsettling than here. You genuinely believe that they were once like us, rather than the robotic designs we get later. The way that they speak, the wide open mouths and the sing-song voice is quite spooky. The regeneration is a belter. You can imagine the 1960s audience thinking, is the Doctor actually going to die? Must have been brilliant and shocking to watch without the hindsight of knowing about regeneration. Although I'm going to miss Billy, he was an extraordinary Doctor and left a lasting legacy. Yeah, you're not wrong, Dan. I think we're on the same page there, my friend. Coming up next, we have heard from MTSM at John MTSM21. And they say, a base Under Siege story is always welcome. A good cast too, plus a new villain who will never sound better than they do here. The voice is creepy with the mouth open but not moving. A great ending as well. I love this story. Thank you for that, John. And next we've heard from Camo Hat Man at Austin523555. And they say, this is a landmark story for multiple reasons. It's the first Base Under Siege story, the first Cyberman story, and the creation of the concept of regeneration. Although Hartnell was sadly too ill to be in the latter 2 episodes much, it's definitely my favourite of his run. Thank you for that. And last up from me, we've heard from Michael Donahue at MDonahue75. And Michael says, a nice little story that's definitely setting the template for the next era. I like these Cybermen designs too. It's sad that Hartnell has little to do. The regeneration is wonderfully spooky and strange. Yes, excellent. Thank you for that. And next up, we're going to have some audio feedback from the legend that is Mr. Andy Moore.
Coming soon from Big Danish Productions. Doctor Who, The Lost Stories. The alternative final first Doctor story.
Sergeant, what's going on out there?
There's somebody out here, General. I can't make out who it is. I can't make out what it is. Who are you? Who are you? What are those things on your chests? Oh my God! It's a polka! They're playing a polka!
Here, give me that. What the hell do you think you're doing? Sergeant, it's Ben Jackson. Listen, this is important. Ask them if they know the Captain Puck washed beef.
Okay. Do you know the Captain Puck? Oh. Ben, will this help?
Nah, I shouldn't think so. I just like it.
Doctor Who and the South East Derbyshire Accordion Band by Kit Pedler and Freddie Parrotface Davis. Big Danish. Wheel of Stories.
Ah, well, that's excellent. What do you guys think of that?
Superb.
Yeah.
Oh.
Definitely up there with some of his best work, I think.
Can we put out an album at the end when we've got...
I think we should, yeah.
Actually, no, because then
I think we just let him take over the show.
He'll want money. I'm learning a lot about copyright.
Okay, Iain, who have you heard from?
So I'm very excited to have this episode's tweet from Millie Mackenzie at Calbear Creates, who says,
"Hi Millie."
Hi Millie. She says of the 10th planet, it's legendary. The Cybermen are creepy as hell. Their voices are pure nightmare fuel. The story is strong and thoroughly enjoyable. I'd recommend this to anyone who hasn't seen the 60s. I've asked up. I'll go again. I'd recommend this to anyone who hasn't seen 60s Who before as the perfect place to start. Next up, the Who Can Convince You podcast at Who Can Convince say, brilliant, an absolute classic that sets up well and sticks the landing. The 4 parts are snappy for the most part, maybe a little bit repetitive with back and forth with the rocket. But those scenes do build some nice tension and mystery about the new planet. The Cybermen, ... they're a brilliant bit of design. They're genuinely creepy and work so well. Just the concept alone is brilliant. I love the underlying subtext that they think they're helping the humans by converting them. So creepy. 9 out of 10. Hayden Gribble of Diddly Dum. I believe he's still of Diddly Dum. I just want to go Diddly Dum quite a lot because I enjoy it. Diddly Dum. It says the 10th planet is better than the 9th planet, but not quite as good as the 11th. Which is also true of the Doctors. Thanks, Hayden. Lord Brian Urso at the Mod Rules 73 says of the 10th planet, it's awesome. So I think that's sort of general approbation there. And lastly,
I think so,
lastly from me, Simon Moore at Simon Moore 72 says a solid but not brilliant story and a template for the show going forward. Whilst looking very different to what they become, I love these Cybermen, more plastic than metal, which I've gone out very Alan Partridge there, more plastic than metal, which makes them creepier. Lynn.
Phone in. Do you prefer metal or plastic? Another one of those tomorrow.
Jim, follow that if you can.
Okay, I think I can, because we have our Antipodean cousins, 42 to Doomsday.
G'day.
Yes, g'day, cobbers. Without the regeneration, which we now know wasn't in the original scripts, it's the beginning of the Base Under Siege template that Innes Lloyd's era became known for. The mythos over Part 4 and the first appearance of the Cybermen has overblown this average runaround to near-biblical proportions. Billy deserved a better last story, and it certainly didn't need an even worse sequel in Twice Upon a Time.
Oh dear.
Well, there lies another can of worms.
We'll get to that in roughly about 55 years.
Yeah, your views may have changed, and 42 to Doomsday's views may have changed in that length of time. On to Philip Edney. Philip says the Hartley era is like no other in inventiveness. Even in his final show, we're introduced to a new format, the Base Under Siege. Also amazing, and after introducing Daleks in the second story, it took till season 4 for another monster to be created worth a reappearance. That's a good point. No one comes back again, at least not during that era.
He's a smart fella, Philip.
Oh yes, he knows his onions. Andy Taylor, who's Bodge77 on Twitter. The first of the Base Under Siege stories. A shame Hartnell is sidelined due to illness, but a momentous piece of TV. It's hard to see now how groundbreaking changing the lead actor must have been. Yeah, it's a big one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
At least that's what Patrick Troughton said. On to Sean, the Mondasian Cyberman, who is...
now, he might have a vested interest in this one.
He hates this one. Can't stand it.
Yes. It's Who Potter Vian on Twitter. One of the greatest regeneration stories of them all. A fantastic send-off for William Hartnell. The Cybermen could not have asked for a stronger debut. Well, the clue is in the Twitter handle, as you say.
Yeah. No, all fair points, though, to be fair.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Sean. And lastly, Anthony Carroll, who's Carol Anthony, who I'm sure I went out with at school. Anyway, Anthony says, love it. Base under attack. Paranoid base leader. Great film sequences of Cybermen. And, of course, a game-changing 4th episode. 8 out of 10, which is the correct score. Thank you, Anthony.
Well, that's great. Thank you all so much for your feedback. It's great hearing from you. And if you want to get involved, we'll be listing all the various ways you can get in touch over the end credits. So we've reached that point where it's time to say thank you to our dear guest, Mr. Jim Cameron. Jim, thank you so much for coming on again.
Well, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure. Never a chore.
Now you have the chance to give another plug to your wonderful podcast. Let's hear all about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel plugged already, but I'll pop the plug out and put it back in again. Yes, it's the Mutoid podcast. I think, and I know in some cases that there is a bit of a crossover between Doctor Who fans and Blake Seven fans. And the Mutoid podcast, a sister podcast to the Crinoid podcast, is about Blake Seven. And we've released 5 episodes, so we've just done perhaps the most marmitey of Blake Seven episodes, The Web, which is
my giddy aunt.
Actually, by the time anyone listens to this episode, we'll be into Series C, I should think.
All right.
Your
Caldor
lead-in
City.
time's a lot longer than ours. But yes, Mutoid podcast in all the usual places. Please give it a listen. Thank you very much indeed.
Right, so before we head to the planet Vulcan, we, I think, are going to have a little retrospective over Mr. Hartnell's era in the show.
I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. And a fitting mark of respect.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, until next time, I was Mark.
I was Ian.
And I was Jim, but I'm now going to fall into some tinsel.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.